All right, well, welcome to the Lifestyle Series, Session 2 on self-compassion. Last week, we talked a lot about self-care, and the reason why we start self-care and self-compassion is because in order to make really strong changes in your lifestyle changes, you kind of have to start there. Like, why make these changes? Why is self-care so important? And if we're not very compassionate with ourselves, then things happen where uh, if we make a mistake or we fail at something, then we just tend to give up. So we always start there: self-compassion, self-care, and really get a solid base and foundation in those two areas so that we can really make sure that we are starting with a good solid foundation to make these changes for the better, to live our best life for the better in our lifestyle. So what is self-compassion? It's really compassion directed inward, just like self-care was self-care directed inward and doing the things we needed to do, which we'll talk about in a moment. So today we're going to uncover the steps to really understand that self-compassion and how to be more compassionate to yourself, and then really put in the practice of that and what that means. So we always want to start out with values, and I will be sending you a values list. And so I sent this with the email last week after the self-compassion session, just to kind of get going on this before. And so values are so very important. And oftentimes we don't take the time to reflect on them and to really even put those words to meaning, but it's really important to really reflect on those words. So for example, there are 1,000 different values out there, and my top value is kindness. Like, I went through the value worksheet, circled my top 5, whittled it down to my top 3, and then really thought and reflected on it, answered some questions, and found out that my top value is kindness. So I really want to be kind to people, and I really want people to be kind to me. And then once I found out that kindness was my top value, then I could kind of see why I reacted to things, why I did. So if I would get if somebody would say something and I would feel bad, or if something happened and I got offended, then I could take a step back and reflect, oh, that's because my top value was kind of that boundary, that kind, loving boundary was crossed. And so once you kind of know this and you reflect on it, then you can say, okay, what are my kind, you can make some boundaries, kind, loving boundaries, so that when things happen, you can really take care of yourself and have a lot of self-compassion and say, okay, this boundary was crossed, but I don't have to react to it because that kindness is my top value, and I can definitely understand why I reacted to it, and then bring in that self-care and self-compassion. So really, once we find out what our top value is and what our values are, can really help transcend your life in a lot of different ways. It can help you make any and all decisions as you're going forward. And then it also kind of will give you that time to take that space between the stressor, something that happens, and your reaction, because in that space is really where we can feel empowered to make that decision on how am I going to react to this? Because sometimes the stressor causes pain, but oftentimes our reaction to that stressor actually causes more pain. So allowing ourselves, some time to just breathe between our stressor and our reaction. Very, very powerful. And our top values can really be the light and strength in our life. And like I had mentioned, can dictate how you respond to any situation. If we don't know what our values are, and we're kind of just reacting to different things, then oftentimes what happens is we react in a way that's more primitive and more negative, and then we just don't even know why. Like, oh man, I don't even know where that came from, and why am I responding this way? And then once you reflect on that, then you can go, oh yes, that boundary was crossed. And it can be from, you know, a past trauma. It can be from your current stress level going on now, or how well you're sleeping, or how well you're eating, and just all of those things. So really it starts there. Like, what are your values? So Roy E. Disney said, it's not hard to make decisions once you know what your values are. So that's kind of a nice statement. So we want to go, Denise, have you ever gone through the self-criticism talk with me before?
No.
Okay. All right. So let's do that now. So we tend to be our own worst critic. So what I want you to do now is, if you have a pen and paper, if you don't, that's okay. You can just kind of think about it. Write down your critical statement that you tell yourself the most often. Like, what do you say? Like, if you make a mistake, or let's say you're walking around with coffee or tea, and it spills a little bit, and you're like, oh man, I'm such a klutz, or I'm so stupid, or, you know, what is that most critical statement that you say to yourself? Think about that for a moment. And, you know, it's good to write it down, because then you kind of see it pen to paper. It's like, oh, you know, it's right there in front of you. You can't unsee it, kind of thing. And sometimes we say these things about ourselves and to ourselves, kind of in the back of our mind subconsciously, that we don't even think about that. But it is so very important to bring that out, because your body and your cells don't know the difference between, oh, you know, I'm so stupid, to really feeling that, and really taking that in, and being in your body. So do you have that statement?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now what I want you to do is, I want you to look me directly in the eyes, and I want you to direct that statement right at me. Like, say that with all your might and all your heart, like right to me.
I am fat.
Okay. And so how did that feel?
Yeah, not good.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So now I want you to say it again, but say you. Like, look me right in the eyes and say that, all, you know, right to me, and say, you are fat.
You are fat.
Okay. How did that feel?
Yeah, not good.
Not good. Okay. Okay. And so that's kind of where where it starts from. So was it easier to say I am fat? Was it harder to say you are fat? Or was it the same?
It was, for me, it was harder to say you are fat.
Sure. Yes. And how do you say it? Do you normally say, when you say it to yourself, do you say I am, or do you say you are? Do you know what's better?
I'm sure I
Both?
say I.
You say I. Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Yep. And yeah, and that's that. Yeah. So we kind of think of these statements, and a good way to really think about them is to kind of take a step back and say, would you say this to another person, and how would that feel? So oftentimes, and I'm very proud of you, Denise, because most people are like, I am not going to say it out loud, and I'm not going to say that to you, and I would never say that to somebody else. So it took a lot of courage for you to do that, because I know in your heart of heart, you probably didn't want to. You probably didn't want to do that. So, but you did it. You did it just so you could get kind of a feeling of, oh man, oh, that does not feel good. And so when we are our own worst critic. And so it's so good to write down these critical statements, the statement that we say the most to ourselves, even subconsciously, because then we can really put it into terms like, if you yourself, kind of going back and remembering, like, when was the first time that you thought that about yourself, or where did that come from? Was it a little, you as a teenager, you as in your 20s, you after you had kids? Was it you after, maybe you were younger, maybe you were in elementary school? And do you remember, Denise, when you first started kind of saying that to yourself?
Now you got me crying.
I know, that's what it's all about.
Um, my mom used to make some comments, but I graduated at 105 pounds. I
Okay,
was always thin, but I went through um, two major depressions
yeah.
in the hospital. And I think it was like the second one that, so I've been listening to some other things, and they say too, the things you've kept saying to yourself over and over, quit saying that.
Yeah.
So I kept thinking it was caused from that depression, because once I got out of the hospital, meds and stuff, I just kept getting bigger. But then I thought, now to prove that, instead of thinking that, I have decided, well, you know what? Maybe I should try eating healthy and exercising. And it's probably not from that, but that's what happened, because weight was never an issue, never. And then all of a sudden I'm the biggest one in the family and it's not moving at all.
So what was some of the comments that your mom would say?
Um,
Like
oh,
she would say something when you were younger?
well, no, when I was, okay, so one time I told her that my aunt was at my office. And in my mind, I thought she was going to say, my aunt said I did a great job helping her. But she said, yeah, your aunt said you look like you gained weight.
Okay.
I
And
remember exactly what I had on. And one other time we tried on a bridesmaid dress for my sister, and I was not that fat, but by the bra line. And we went to sister-in-law's afterwards, and she said, can I give you guys lunch? And my mom said, everyone but Denise.
oh,
You
yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
like, but I found out later in her life that being thin was so important to her.
Yeah.
And she was excellent at what she thought was constructive criticism. And I don't believe in constructive criticism. I just,
Right.
but anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes there really is no place for that, but kind of looking at it and saying, or, yeah, you're right. Knowing that being thin is so important for her. She may have had some past trauma with it herself, and that became kind of really important to her. And then she reflected that back on you. And that's not fair, and that isn't right, which it isn't. And so you can, and just by you saying that, like, you realize that she had this issue with needing to be thin, and knowing that and reflecting that on you. We know that, right? You know that.
Yes, yes.
And we do. Words are so very, so very, very powerful. So when you take a step back and say, that was on her, that's not on me, and then you can go back and to that person, to you, to that younger version of yourself that was, after that was told to you, after that was said, and then you kind of took that in, and after what she told you, what your aunt had said, that's that moment you go back to. And as hard as it is, you go back to that person whose heart was broken, who, you internalize that, and you tell yourself, your younger self, what you needed to hear at that point. And if you had somebody standing right by you, who overheard it, they would have been like, oh, what? And as a friend, they would have turned to you and go, oh my gosh, that was not a good thing. That's not a right thing to say. That's not true. And then whatever else you need, only you know what you needed to hear in
Well,
that moment.
it was funny when she said that to me. We were on the phone, and I said to her, I started crying, and I said, "Don't you think if I gained weight, I know that by
Yeah,
my, you know?" I said, "I'm not calling you long distance for you to tell me I gained weight."
yeah.
And my dad was sick, and he was in bed, and she goes, "Now you woke up your dad," and I'm
Oh, yeah.
20 miles away on the phone. But one other thing I think about the exercising is I've had tachycardia all my life,
Mhm.
and it's really I'm on Tenolol, so that's really good. But I think I did not want to do a lot of all of a sudden, running, like sweating, exercise because I was afraid it would take off. You
Right. Yeah.
so I really think that's where, I just wasn't as active, although I
Mhm.
haven't had you know, I haven't had anything for a long time.
Sure.
But those two
Yeah.
things, you know.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yep. So yeah, so we want to really look at that statement and or any statement and really go back. And I'm glad you stood up for yourself during that time. Of course, and as human beings, we tend to know that those people who say those things will never apologize. They'll never hear you out. They'll never go, "Oh gosh, yeah, I'm so sorry I said that. That was not nice." And then, it'd be nice if they could reflect and say, "Oh, I've been kind of worried about this my whole life for myself to gain weight or whatever." And then maybe her past words that she was told when she was younger about, gaining weight and who knows if her mom said, you will not really in these words, but you will not be accepted if you are overweight. And oftentimes we tend to get these, we know if we are a certain way, we'll be judged because the people around us are judging people who are that way, right? So if
Right.
you see somebody who's overweight and you're with your mom or your dad and then they're making comments about it, then you're like, oh, I better not gain weight. And that's how we learn, by other people's judgments and statements and things. And then that can make us feel really bad because you are not your weight. Weight is just a number. It's just your relation to gravity, and there's so much more. There's so much more to us, and that's why those values are so very important, and really taking care of those things. So when you look at that critical statement, we want to cross it out, and we want to write down "I am," and write down some positive statements about yourself. And that is what we want to kind of keep repeating, because every time we repeat that positive statement about ourselves, that has a positive state, or that has a positive effect on our, all the way down to our cellular level. Think about a live plant. There was a research study that was done, and they took two plants. And in one plant, there were two different studies that were done. There was one plant that was given a recording of somebody just um, really negative statements to the plant, like all day long, like bad vibes and bad energy, like, "Oh, plant, you're so dumb and you're not going to grow and you're so stupid," and like all this stuff. And then to the other plant, they put in a recording that, "Oh, you're going to grow and you're beautiful and I love you," and keep going. And it was watered the same, it had the same amount of sun and everything. And guess what? The plant that got the negative words didn't grow, and the plant that got the positive words grew and was just so vibrant. And so if plants can grow with positivity, think about humans. It's amazing. My husband is a tree whisperer. He can make a tree grow where it's not supposed to, and when he is around, those trees just sway and sway. And his brother came over, and his brother said something like, "Oh, these trees are getting too big and there's ants on them." And what are you going to do about these trees? And those trees did not move. They were just silent. And it was just the most bizarre thing I had ever witnessed. And then as soon as my husband went out there, they just started to sway again.
Oh my gosh.
It was like, oh my, yes, it was crazy. So that study has been done over and over and over again with different types of plants, different types of words, and it's amazing. So we really need to not only go back to kind of like when was the first time that we heard this or heard something similar, and really go and take care of that heart and that soul of our being in that moment. And then we can come back and really take care of ourselves in the moment and change that I am beautiful. I am vibrant. I am a good friend. And, keep on going, not just a few, put a whole page down of all the positive things about yourself. It's so important. And Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And that's really true. And with our words too. So we can, with our own words, we can make ourselves feel inferior. So very true. So that self-criticism, we are our own worst critic, and it's good to bring that out and heal from that. And then really that courage to be yourself too. And that can be kind of a hard thing, but we wear a lot of masks as being human. And so I really like this saying by Michelle Silverstein, and he wrote this, and it said, she had blue skin and so did he. He kept it hid and so did she. They searched for blue their whole life through, then passed right by and never knew. And so many people put on these masks, and it's much harder to find your people and your friends when we're just always wearing this mask. And if the person next to you is wearing a mask, and you guys are so similar, and oh my gosh, we need to really heal from our past and present, and just really look toward the future and healing, so that we can naturally shed these masks and be ourselves. So taking off that mask can be very hard, because we've learned to put these masks on almost as a barrier around our heart and our feelings and our soul. And their barriers can be several different things in our life. So really dare greatly, and really figure out what that top value is, and really reflect on it. And I'll send you the questionnaire around that. And that will help you show up and be seen as yourself. And then oftentimes what happens is we can, once we find our values and kind of really start taking care of ourselves, then we also find those things that we really enjoy doing, and then we start doing them. So if we really like to crochet, then, and if we're not doing that, then maybe we can join a crocheting class, and then we'll find other people in that class who have similar hobbies and likes as us. And so that's kind of that common bond of kind of finding things that you like to do that other people like to do as well. And then allowing yourself to be vulnerable, but also honoring those boundaries like you did by saying, that wasn't very nice. I didn't appreciate you saying that. And I know I've gained weight because my clothes are tighter, but I don't need to hear that from you. So that's really good. That's really good for us to be able to, to speak our mind in a way that's important. So being vulnerable can be hard, and sharing your story with the right people, because not everyone does deserve to hear your story. Only those who will protect it, only those who will say, after you've told them something, they can say, thank you for sharing that with me. I will not share that with anybody because that's your story to share. But I really appreciate and happy that you were able to confide in me and share that with me. And then you can talk, back and forth about it. So just, because there are some people who, if you tell them, they'll kind of use it against you because there's that vulnerability there. And that can be a really hard thing to learn and a really hard thing to know. And then, taking care of yourself in all aspects. And that's really what this lifestyle series is about, is that self-care and self-compassion. And that's what we're going to be talking today. So when we get into those values, that really leads you to P&P, which is passions and purpose. So I kind of talked a little bit about this as like the crocheting group, but the definition of passion is just a strong feeling of enthusiasm for something or about doing something. And then a good way to look at this is, are you living out your passions? And some people are like, no, I'm so busy doing other things that sometimes I say yes to everything just to keep myself busy because I don't really know what I want to do. And sometimes that's easier not to even think about it, but it's good to really start thinking about it and knowing like, what do I really enjoy, and really filling your life with those things that you enjoy. So sometimes a good question is, what did you like to do when you were younger? Because oftentimes those things don't change. And then what did you want to be when you grew up? So reflecting on that too, and are there aspects of that you can say, oh yeah, I can volunteer, or sometimes we have a whole new career change as it relates to that. So those are some good questions about passions, and just, what do I really want to do right now, and what would really fill my cup and have me feeling like I'm being resourceful and doing what I really want to do. And that leads into the purpose. So the definition is the reason for which something is done or created, so, for which something exists. And are you living out your purpose? We all have a purpose, and really you do not need to know your purpose right now. And sometimes you don't find our purpose until we're much older, and that's okay. So we know oftentimes what happens is struggles in your life now will lead to your purpose later. So I always use the example of a kid who ends up breaking their leg in an accident of some type, and they end up going to physical therapy and the orthopedic surgeon and all of that stuff. And through that struggle, they had such a kind of a transformation that they decided to become a physical therapist or an orthopedic surgeon. So if they never had that struggle, they wouldn't have had that experience of finding their career path. So we know that the struggles that we take place are there, and they're meant to give us these lessons that can kind of propel us for our future. So it can be some very powerful reflections. So progress, not perfection. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's ever been perfect, and nobody will ever be perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. There's no such thing. And so sometimes when, I talk to somebody who's either type A or who's striving to be perfect, sometimes if I just say that, it doesn't exist, you will never be perfect, you've never been perfect, sometimes that will just, it's almost like the weight of the world is released from their shoulders, because it doesn't exist. And who wants to be perfect anyway? That is boring. It's boring. We want to be able to just, be carefree and have some fun. And so a good way to put it is in every day and in every way, I'm getting better and better. And because we're learning and we're growing, and we're just figuring things out, and that's okay. And so I really love this HALE principle, and you may have heard me talk about this before. And what it is HALE. And so it's high aspirations, low expectations. So this can help you with yourself, but it can also help you with others too. So we really are aspiring to do the best that we can every single day. And so we have low expectations that, some days we may need to just sit on the couch and watch old movies all day long. Maybe your energy is low, maybe you're feeling sad, maybe you just need a day of nothing. and that's okay. That day you're aspiring to do the best you can, and you don't have any expectations for yourself. My husband's a prime example of this. When we first got married, I just didn't feel like doing something one day. I only worked 4 days a week. I had Fridays off, and he came home from work and laundry wasn't done, dishes weren't done. The house was a mess, and he came in and he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, it looks like you just needed a rest day." And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he's like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go start some laundry." I'm like, "Okay, all right." And by the next day, I had more energy, and I was able to, sky's the limit. I was able to do everything I needed to do. And so sometimes we might have to have just lower expectations of ourselves because we're taking care of ourselves in a different way. It definitely feels better when the laundry's done and the house is clean, and then I can, move on. But some days it's okay to do something different too. So, so if we're aspiring to do the best that we can, then we're enough. We're enough all the time. We're worthy and we're enough. We're just doing the best we can in that moment. And when we look at the Hale principle, we're looking at how we kind of reflecting on how we view others around us. So do you have a lot of high expectations of those around you, kind of reflecting on that to think, is that helping? Is that okay? Is that a good thing? Maybe not. Maybe it's not a good thing. And oftentimes it isn't, because you can't change anybody and you can't make anybody do anything. So this helps so much when dealing with other people. So you're expecting them to do the best they can. And that they're aspiring to do the best they can at any given moment. And, their energy is going to wane and shift as well. So sometimes that can really allow us to kind of give other people a break as well as ourselves. So I love the Hale principle. It's one of my top principles that really help you kind of get through life with not only your own relationship with yourself, but relationship with others. So we talked about self-care last time a little bit, and so I'm just going to review that for just a moment. So does self-care matter? And yes. So ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? So that oftentimes starts with having that reflection and having that awareness. In this moment, I am feeling stressed. Oh, I'm feeling so stressed, and I'm feeling stressed because. So we're putting it to words, like, what's going on in my life right now, and I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling stressed because this or that. And then you kind of bring in that common humanity, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then we say, okay, what do I need in this moment? And so then we bring that mindfulness. So living in the moment, it's the only one we have. That's so important because when we're kind of stressed and anxious or depressed, depression is oftentimes living in the past, and anxiousness is oftentimes living in the future. So it's not living in the moment. It's not living in today. So the more we practice mindfulness and living in this moment, the more our brain changes, and the more calm we become, and the more we're able to take care of ourselves and have more self-compassion. And then that oxygen mask is something that we hear all the time. We cannot serve from an empty cup. We cannot put on everyone's oxygen mask on the airplane before we put ours on. We need to put that on ourselves, and then we can help out the person by us and even more. So it's so important to take care of yourself first. And then I'll send you that video. And then, so how self-compassionate are you? So take the test. I sent this out last week, but I'll send it out again this week. And basically it's a few questions. It'll give you a number, I think between 1 and 5, or 0 and 5. And then you can kind of rate how compassionate you are for yourself. So it's just an awareness tool. And then it can kind of give you some descriptions of that number after. So self-compassion, again, simply compassion directed inward. And there's three main elements: kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. So self-kindness is really being warm and understanding toward ourselves, even when we're suffering. So, oops, I went too far. Okay, even when we're suffering, if we fail, feel inadequate rather than self-criticism. So it's easy to be more critical of ourselves. I mean, that's kind of our go-to, that's human nature, but we want to kind of look at that self-compassion, self-kindness. How can we be kind to ourselves? And with self-kindness, we soothe and nurture ourselves when confronting our pain, rather than getting angry with when life falls short of our ideals. And because we're human, we're going to fail, we're going to fall short, things are going to happen. So just like we would, if we had a chance to go up to that little girl that's inside of us and say something, how would we treat her and what would we say? So we would be very soothing and nurturing if we could kind of put that little girl in front of us. And we can still do that. We can do that. Sometimes it takes a lot of practice. And so we clearly acknowledge our problems and shortcomings, but we do so without judgment. And so then we can take that next step and really help ourselves in that moment. So no need to judge, even good or bad. It's just that awareness and that reflection. That's so important. And then we get into that common humanity. And so the common humanity is really recognizing that the human condition is imperfect and that we're not alone in our suffering. So being human and being on this earth, everybody suffers, everybody gets stressed. That's part of our survival, and that's okay. So the human condition is imperfect, and oftentimes, like I had mentioned before, just knowing that can help, especially if you feel like you need to be perfect all the time. And there's no such thing. So you're not alone. And then we can't always get what we want or be who we want. And that's part of the human experience. So it's a shared experience by everyone on the planet. And, we're just striving to do the best that we can at every given moment. And sometimes being really grateful for the moment that you're in and who you are at this time. And then in those learning lessons of our suffering, can kind of catapult ourselves onto becoming who we're meant to become, and that's okay. And remembering we're not alone in our imperfections. The imperfections make us part of the human race. And like I mentioned before, perfectionism is boring. We want to be able to just be carefree and just be ourselves. And so failure and imperfection are normal. So you're normal. You're a human being, and that is enough. So let's get into that mindfulness. Talked a little bit about it, but really the definition is awareness of the present moment with acceptance. Whatever's happening in the moment, you're accepting them, and then being mindful of thoughts. So what thought are you having right now? What is that thought transcending in your body, in your mind, in your future, and in your past? Kind of just reflecting on it. Oftentimes I'll hear people say is I'm, fill in the blank. And then just notice these thoughts. So bringing attentions. I'm having the thought that I'm this. And are these thoughts helpful and are they true? So always telling yourself the truth is so very important as it relates to healing. And when we look at those, when we kind of notice those thoughts and write them down or just reflect on them, we can say, is this true? No. When people say, oh, I'm fat, and I'm like, you know what? You're also muscle, you're also bone, you're also organs. So maybe we should start calling ourselves, I'm organs, right? Or I'm bones, or I'm muscle, right? Because everybody, unless they have a specific condition, has fat on their body. Everybody does. And there's a specific condition where there's some people who can't um, gain an ounce of fat on their body, and they're really suffering. They have a really hard time, and they have to accept that they can't, and they're cold, and they're just all skin and bones. And so we don't want that either, right? So we're trying to find that, find that balance. And I talk to my kids all the time, and when they mention that, or somebody has said something, I'll say, well, that, what, I'm going to start, I'm also, muscles, bones, and organs. So I'm going to start calling myself organs, because I also have those on me too. So it's kind of looking at it as at that awareness, that awareness and that reflection point. Is it helpful? Oftentimes when we say these I am statements, it's not helpful. It just kind of brings us down, and it doesn't catapult us into taking care of ourselves or having self-compassion, and it's not kind. So that mindfulness really involves turning toward our pain, our thoughts, our emotions, and seeing them as they are without judgment. It's without numbing, grasping, pushing away, avoiding, or suppressing, which in America we tend to do all the time. So we want to numb it by sleeping, oversleeping, or overeating, or drinking, or alcohol, or drugs, or we just don't want to feel anything. And when we can feel it, we can heal it. And when we can name it, we can tame it. So and it doesn't feel very good to kind of sit into those things and reflect on it, but it is so very healing. Oftentimes you want to grasp, we think doing one thing or grasping onto another person, or codependency relationships will heal us. And nobody can do the work but you. We'll push people away, we'll avoid, we'll try to suppress and not think about things. But when we think, when we can reflect, and we can become aware of these things, we end up kind of like this pot that has a cap on it that's about to boil, and eventually it will erupt. And we need to take that cap off and really, really turn towards that pain and thought and emotion, and just really be in that moment, kind of sit in that muck, and just be there, and reflect on it. It's very healing. Recognizing what we're feeling, acknowledge the pain where we feel it in the body, can be very healing as well, because our mind and body are so very connected. So we can have a thought, let's say a deer ran out in front of us, and our body did what it needed to do, because the primitive brain is so very powerful. Our foot slammed on the brake, the deer went by. Oh, phew, that was a close one, and we kept going. But you could kind of still feel that in the body, that fight or flight, that cortisol was released to allow our body to do what it needed to do, which is a good thing, because then we didn't, we don't have to tell, because then we survived. And if we had to tell our foot to get on the brake, and we would have hit the deer. So, but later on, if we didn't take some deep breaths, and if we didn't shake it off, and we didn't talk ourselves through it, we could kind of think about that deer. Maybe we're trying to sleep, and all of a sudden we thought about, oh my gosh, it was so stressful. And then we could have another cortisol release just from a thought, right? I mean, our brain, our mind and body are so very connected. And so it's a good thing to kind of take a step back, have that awareness, and say, okay, I'm feeling that in my shoulders, are so tense, or I'm getting a headache, or my heart is pounding, or I feel that in my chest or my stomach, and just acknowledging that pain, acknowledging where you feel it in the body. Very important. And then responding with acknowledgement, self-compassion, and common humanity. Saying, ouch, this really hurts. I'm so tense, it hurts. And of course, if anyone had that same thought, or if anyone went through that same suffering or pain or situation, they would feel the same way, because you're not alone. You're not alone. Having that stress response is a universal thing. And we need that, because it's part of survival. So we can kind of look at that stress as a positive thing for survival. And then we want to react to that pain, thoughts, emotions, not only where we're feeling it, not only acknowledging it, but also reacting to it with kindness towards self and self-care. So what do I need in this moment? Knowing that that stress reaction is fundamentally good and your body is trying to tell you something. Maybe your body is trying to tell you that part of your value was crossed, or that you need some self-care, or that you need to get this cortisol released. Are you listening? Are you listening to what your body needs? And so sometimes when we take a step back and say, oh my gosh, what I really need is to talk to someone, or talk to someone, or I need to punch a pillow, or I need to go for a walk, I need to get this cortisol out. That's part of that self-care in that moment. Sometimes we don't even listen to that. We just kind of push it out, push it away, and just kind of keep on trudging along. And then what happens is we start to get some chronic issues and disease, and because our mind and body is connected and it affects our body. So it's so important to listen and really come up with those ways that that you can care for yourself. So then also it leads into that self-compassion, and it really, self-compassion facilitates resilience by really helping us to react to any situation in a very, very healing way. Self-compassion then leads to self-care, and then self-care leads to strong, sincere, healthy boundaries, loving boundaries. And then it also leads us to be less afraid of failure and more likely to learn from failures, mistakes, and allows us a willingness to keep trying and without judgment, trying new things and learning from our mistakes. So very important, because every single time we try something and it doesn't work out, that's one less thing that we need to try next time. And then it also leads us to more empathetic concern, perspective taking, and forgiveness of others. So when we learn from our failures and our mistakes, and if we're having the willingness to keep trying and we're less afraid to make those mistakes, then we have that ability to recognize that in others when they make a mistake, or when they fail, or when they're trying so hard. So it also helps us create a common bond in humanity as well. So it can be very powerful. And then it comes down to really valuing your time and really valuing your values. So I really like this quote here. It says, there is not time for even 1 second of your day to spend on thinking that you're not good enough and not worthy enough, right? Where, there's so much truth into that. And there's so much healing in that. And so kind of thinking about, what is true and what is hurtful and what is healing. That one. And then this Louisa May Alcott said, I'm not afraid of storms, for I'm learning how to sail my ship. And what, basically what that means is, through all of our suffering and things that happen in our life, we're learning from them, and we're learning how to better take care of ourselves. And so basically we're learning how best to live our life and live our best life. And then this Michelle Obama said, find your flame and keep it lit. So there's some flames on the bottom there. So really figuring out the best way to take care of yourself and continue to learn how to give yourself a lot of self-compassion, and find those things that you really love and passionate about, and just be yourself, and all those good things. So we are actually going to do a self-compassion exercise, and you do have time for that. So what I want you to do, sit back and relax. Take a couple of deep breaths, and when you take that deep breath, really fill your whole torso. So imagine that your hips are the bottom of the glass, and your sides are the side of the glass, and the top of the glass is the bottom of your chin. And really fill that glass with oxygen. Really expand your belly, rise, lungs fill up, and then exhaling fully. This next deep breath in, kind of bring your shoulders up to your ears, kind of allowing that space for your lungs to expand. And then exhaling fully. Now, what I want you to do, just breathe naturally. What I want you to do is really bring in to your consciousness, into your mind, someone or something that you really love, a being. Maybe it's the bird outside your window. Maybe it is someone who's really close to you, who you really have loving feelings towards. And I just want you to think about that person, really get that person into your mind. And now to yourself, as you listen to these words, I want you to just think about them and really direct them to this person. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you live with ease. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. And may you live with ease. Now what I want you to do is bring yourself into that mix. Just imagine yourself sitting right next to that being, and bring yourself into that circle of awareness and compassion, and repeat these words to your being and yourself. May we be safe. May we be happy. May we be peaceful. May we live with ease. May we be safe. May we be happy. And may we be peaceful. May we live with ease. Now, what I want you to do is just kind of drop that other being, just send that other being on their happy way. And I want you to direct all these words of self-compassion to yourself. And just allow yourself to breathe in these words. May I be safe. And may I be happy. May I be peaceful. And may I live with ease. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease. Now go ahead and just be in your body. Just take a couple more deep breaths. And just notice how you're feeling. And on your next exhalation, go ahead and wiggle your fingers and your toes and bring yourself back to the chair that you're sitting on. And just notice how you're feeling. Opening your eyes if they're closed. And tell me, how was that for you?
Relaxing.
Relaxing. Yeah, good. Good. How hard or easy was it to be able to direct those words to the other person, to you both, to yourself? Was one easier, or were you kind of indifferent about it?
I liked all three.
All three, yep. So oftentimes self-compassion for beginners usually starts with the other, because it's easier to be compassionate to others, and then bringing yourself in the mix. Then you already have those self-compassion feelings inside you, and then bringing it onto to yourself can kind of be an easier transition. So that's why we always start with another being, because it is easier. So but that's, it's definitely good to continue to kind of think of those words, and you can even use other words like may I be, whatever you need to hear in that moment. This can be done anytime, anywhere, or it can also be done like after you have moments of that self-critical statement. Kind of sit and reflect on that, and say, okay, well, what's going on right now? Where is that coming from? Now let me tell myself the truth, and give myself some helpful words, because words are, like I had mentioned before, very, very powerful. So some other thoughts. So we definitely mirror what we think. Um, and it shows a lot, because we are a reflection to the world of what's going on inside of us. So if you judge others, you are more likely to think others are judging you. And so one of a huge aha moment for some people is that is definitely around that. If we oftentimes think that other people are noticing or thinking things, and that's because we notice those about ourselves. We notice that thing, or that moment about ourselves. So sometimes I notice this especially in teens, like if they have a pimple on their face. They're going about their day being really, really happy, and they might use the bathroom in the middle of the day to wash their hands, and all of a sudden they look in the mirror and they notice a pimple. So the rest of the day, they're just really stressed. And whenever somebody looks at them, they're like, oh my gosh, you're looking at my pimple. And then they might even start bringing it up, like, oh my gosh, I have this pimple. And people are like, what? I didn't even notice. And so it just totally changed the course of their whole day. They didn't even notice it. They were being carefree and living their life. And then they got really self-conscious about it. And then they're like, oh my gosh, this pimple must be my whole face. And nobody even notices it. So oftentimes what we're feeling, and we're manifesting that out to the outer world, when if we knew how less people are thinking about other people because they're so worried about themselves, it's kind of a aha moment, and we can kind of take a deep breath to say, oh, okay, nobody's really thinking about this or about me in this way. People just don't have time, which is I liken it to the saying that we can look at it two different ways. We could go, oh, nobody's thinking about me, or we could say nobody's thinking about me. Like, it definitely, it's the same statement, but we can have two different attitudes around it. And they can both be good. So to take care of others, you need to take care of yourself, and you cannot give from an empty cup. That's another one. And we know that social media really makes it harder to allow space for self-compassion, because we end up comparing ourselves. Social media, people only will put their best life on there. If somebody takes a selfie, they could take 100 of them just to get the perfect picture with the right lighting, and it's not real. It's not real. It's 100 selfies, perfect lighting, all this other stuff, filters, everything. So it's not good to compare yourself with other people's version of reality that is made up. So comparison to others, not even as it relates to social media, it's anything. Comparison will kill your joy. It's not real. So last thought, so inner wisdom can be experienced by being mindful of our thoughts, values, feelings, and words. We really become a student of ourselves and a teacher of ourselves, and we can learn so much, and we can teach ourselves so much if we just take the time to reflect and become more aware. So we can access this wisdom to be on our own wellness journey by really being aware of what will work for us through self-care and self-compassion and that awareness. So self-compassion leads to healthy choices, and that leads to living our best life. So I'm going to stay on for a few minutes. I know it's 1 o'clock right now, but I can stay on if you have any questions.